Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. My name's Jamie Salter, and I'm in sunny San Diego today. We're finally getting some sun after a lot of rain. And a little bit about myself, I am trained as a school psychologist, as a board certified behavior analyst, as an autism specialist, and I spent about a decade working as a senior program specialist and administrator in special education.
And I am Dr. Katie Croce. I am also a board certified behavior analyst, excuse me, and an autism specialist. I worked in public schools and private schools, inpatient hospitals, supporting students with challenging behavior. And I also served as a special ed coordinator for a period of time. And I currently work in higher education now, training undergraduate students in applied behavior analysis.
And we have a very lofty agenda today, and we hope to get it done in 20 minutes. But what we want to do is we want to give you a brief overview of what the self and match system is. It sounds like everyone's coming in with a slightly different knowledge base. And after we go through what that self and match system is, we're going to talk about how it can enhance behaviors in schools, how it can be used as a tier one to tier three intervention, aligning self and match to facilitate progress monitoring and looking at using it with IEPs if you're using it with students that are identified as having special needs. And then we're going to talk about training opportunities. And our hope is to get through this in 20 minutes. So, one of the big questions that come up is why is this so important? And are behaviors being seen now that are higher than before the pandemic? And for many of you, I bet you're seeing that. I bet you're seeing that behaviors are higher. And as Katie and I go to New York and Hawaii and New Mexico and Colorado, we're seeing the same thing. We're seeing people say behaviors are higher right now. I have so many things going on in schools. And this slide is basically to tell you you're not imagining things. There is evidence showing that behaviors are higher post pandemic. We are hearing this white paper that came out from NASP in during the pandemic said that during a typical school trajectory, approximately 20% of students are experiencing some type of social, emotional, or behavioral concern. 20%. But they're saying that number is now expecting to double or triple due to the pandemic. So these social emotional learning needs, these behaviors that you're seeing in your schools, it's not just isolated to where you are. It's a new epidemic in itself. And we know that many districts are faced with teachers that haven't been receiving a ton of training in classroom management and behavioral management. We know that many schools have funds that they need to spend, whether it was COVID relief funds or other funds in terms of professional development. And so what we hope to do is provide a tool for your toolbox that you might want to use as you're supporting your students.
So what is the purpose of the self and match system? Our goal is really to provide an intervention that students can utilize to help monitor their own behaviors. And we really do this by systematically teaching students how to engage in more pro-social behaviors so that they can better access their learning, have stronger relationships, and ultimately that helps them lead to a better quality of life. And that's what it's all about for us. And we know that is why you all are here and interested in learning about new tools to help your students be more successful. So the self and match system is a manualized self-monitoring intervention and motivational system. It is firmly grounded in behavioral science, and it can be utilized as part of a school-wide positive behavior support intervention system, as well as Jamie mentioned, all the way up the tiers of support from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3. It's been implemented internationally to support neurotypical students, as well as students representing underrepresented subgroups. So students that have disabilities, preschool students all the way up to post-secondary in general and special education classrooms.
Yep. And I did see a first question come in, and that's how can we access the recording? And I wanted to let you know, number one, we will email it to you after today, so you have access to that. And number two, we really welcome questions as they come up. I won't always be stopping to answer them. We might get to them at the very end, but if you have questions, feel free to use that Q&A throughout today's 15 minutes together. So with Self and Match, there's four fundamental core elements at the core of the intervention. The first is systematic planning. We believe that making systematic decisions as you're setting up this tool is what will lead to the effectiveness. We feel so strongly about this that we created a collaborative roadmap, which we call a considerations guide, that we would encourage you to fill out as teachers, as behaviorists, as psychologists, as parents or whoever your team is, the student, to ensure that as you're setting up the intervention, you've thought of every single what if before you start that intervention. The second is no one is perfect. We're not looking to make perfect students. We're really aiming for progress. We're really looking at that growth mindset. Where is our student now, and where can we lead them so that they are more behaviorally successful, and better able to access their curriculum? But we're not looking at making perfect children. In fact, we feel so strongly about this that there's no way to set a goal of 100% for students as you're using self-image. That third is the importance of thinking about why the student's engaging in behavior. What is the kind of function of their behavior? We try not to use behavioral jargon in our trainings, but really thinking about that why as we're developing the intervention, and also as we're considering reward options. And lastly, we really feel strongly that the intervention should evolve and change as a student's behavior evolves and changes. So if your staff were to implement self-image in April, it would look very different in June, and it would look very different at the end of the year. And we'll show you a sample of that in just a few slides.
Yeah. So let me talk you through some of the procedures, and we'll show you some samples of some self and match forms. So this is what kind of is the uniquity of self and match. So the first thing that happens is that the student answers all of their questions on their self and match form independently. Then the teachers answer the questions independently as well. And then after the teachers and students respond, they look and compare their answers. So if you look up in the top right-hand corner here, there's a little key, and it says if the student says yes and the teacher says yes, that they engage in the expected behavior, they get at least 2 points. They get 1 point because they honestly self-reflected, and they get 1 point because they engage in that expected behavior. It also says if the student says, no, I didn't do what was expected, and the staff agrees and says, no, you didn't do what was expected, the student still gets 1 point. And that's really something that's very unique to self and match compared to other interventions, is that we're reinforcing the fact that they recognize that they didn't engage in an expected behavior. And the first step in making a behavior change is recognizing that you haven't engaged in what was expected. So we want to reward the student and reinforce the student and praise them for saying, thank you so much for being honest. I'm so glad that you honestly self-reflected. And now what can we do to help you make a change for next time? So that's something that's very, very unique to self and match. We don't want students to see no as a bad thing. We want students to see no as an opportunity to grow. As Jamie mentioned, we're really embracing that growth mindset. And then at some point in time, the student gets access to some type of reward or reinforcer, depending on some criteria that we set. But as Jamie mentioned, we don't ever set criteria higher than 90 to, maybe 95% at max, because we want students to recognize that we all make mistakes, and that's okay.
So I like to say that there's no good training in the education field without some type of triangle or pyramid. So here we go. What this basically illustrates for you is what we're going to show you on the next few slides, which is self and matches and intervention can help behaviors in school and can decrease behaviors in school on a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3 level. So we've seen this intervention used at the highest level with students with IEPs that are in self-contained special education classes. We've also seen this intervention used in general education classes with students that do not have identified special needs. And I'm going to show you a little bit about both of those just to kind of get your vision. And of course, in a longer training or in a follow-up, we could talk more about what this would look like in your setting. So this form was maybe identified for a student that was that did have an IEP, an individualized form. You can see we set 3 target areas designed just for this student. Was I respectful? Was I flexible, and did I follow directions? And did I use good personal space? We always, always stress that one of your questions should be something attainable, something that you can every single time say, great job using good personal space. I'm really proud of you. So every single form has between 3 to 5 questions. And one of those questions is an attainable question. We sometimes call it a gimme question. So for this particular student, we identified that they would rate themselves 3 times over the period of 3 hours. So that's about once an hour. At that time, the student would fill in yes or no in the white column. The staff would fill in yes or no in the gray column. And then they would simply compare their yes or no answers based on that code at the top, which was yes, yes is 2, no, no is 1, because they honestly self-reflected, and yes, no is 0. We always have a date on the form, every single form. We'll talk later about how self-and-match not only is a powerful tool for behavior change, but it's also a powerful tool for making database decisions and reporting progress on goals. So you always have a date. That form also has a reward criteria at the top, and it has a goal at the bottom of 80%. So this is a very basic form. What you'll see through our system and looking through our manual is there's hundreds or thousands of ways to individualize it. So this is just one standard way. Katie, show us another one.
Yeah, so this might be for a learner who needs some more support. So there's a lot of visual supports that are in here. We say that this could be for a learner who has unique needs. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be for a very young learner, but this could be somebody that maybe has some emerging reading skills and emerging math skills. So we do highly encourage you to utilize visual supports for students who need those needs, but we also encourage you to keep that language on the form so we can continue to expose our students to that language. So you can see it's a very similar form to the one that was on the previous slide. We have the same questions, but we've added those pictures, but maybe this is a learner whose behaviors happen a little bit more frequently. So he wouldn't be successful rating 3 times during 3 hours. So we broke it down into 5 rating opportunities in 3 hours, because we want to set it at a pace where the student can be successful. So we have smiles and frowns instead of the blanks where the student can write the name in. We also have these little boxes here, which is another accommodation. So if this is a learner that doesn't have one-to-one correspondence yet, or is having some beginning math skills, we can say a yes, yes is 2 points and write a little 2 in here. A no, no is worth 1 point, write a little 1 in here, and a yes, yes is worth 2 points, we write a 2 in here. Then we can say 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, and write the number here. Additionally, that might not be enough for a learner, so we have also this rating here, 5 or 6 points equals a star. So if the learner doesn't have any real understanding of those math skills, we could put the star here to show them that they're visually getting closer to their reward. Also up at the top, we have if I earn 4 stars by the end of group, I can choose something. So again, we can circle the stars as the learner is earning so that they can see they're getting closer and closer to their reward.
Yep, and Katie, we had a really good question come up in the chat. And Anna, this is one that in our manual and in our longer, introductory training, we really go into detail, but I want to answer it because it's such a great, it shows that you're really thinking this through. Her question is, what happens if a student marks themselves as a no and the teacher marks themselves as a yes, or the teacher thought it was going to be a yes? And the very short answer is we ask them why they gave themselves a no, because their response then guides us 2 different directions of how we would respond from there. But if a student says no, we always say, why did you give yourself a no? And we go from there. And we can talk more about that later if we have time at the end. I want to illustrate 2 more individualized self-and-match forms before we go on and talk a little bit more over these last 7 minutes together. This form is used in a general education class with all general education students. So this class is about 35 fifth graders, and what I love about this is a couple of key things. Number one, the school has a strong PBIS school already. They already feel strongly that every student in the school should know that they are soaring because they're eagles. They are safe, they are showing ownership, they're showing acceptance and respect. And because the school had strong PBIS language, the teacher said, I want to have my students self-reflect on whether they're soaring. I want them to answer, was I being safe? Did I show ownership? Did I show acceptance? And did I show respect? So 3 times a day, right before recess, right before lunch, and right before the end of the day, she has all of her students self-reflect on whether they met those 4 target areas, and then she provides feedback on it next. And they do that, both that self-reflection and that match with the teacher. And some people say, wow, she does this with 36 students or 34 students or 32, I forget what number she has. And the answer is yes. And she does it just as an exit ticket. As you're walking out to recess, we're going to fill out our self-and-match. As we're walking out to lunch, we're going to fill out our self-and-match. And 2 other key things to mention, and I could go on and on about this form. One is, because these are general education students in their last year of elementary school, she decided she wanted the yes match to have more power. So she made that yes match worth 3 points and the no match worth 1. So it's still okay to make mistakes. Mistakes are how we grow. You can still get partial credit for a no, but the yeses are what I'm really shooting for. So those yeses are going to be worth 3. The other thing that I think we go into so much more detail in our full trainings is, if I were to ask Anna and Rebecca and Katie and other people that are on this call today, did you show acceptance or did you show ownership? You might all have a different understanding of what that word means. And it's impossible for our students to self reflect on their behavior if they don't know what that means. So, our first step of teaching self monitoring is teaching expectations. And we go through in a lot of detail in our manual and our training on how do you set class expectations or individual expectations in a way that students can embrace that and understand it and consistently reflect on it. The next form that I want to briefly show you is a form that is really interesting because they use self-image school wide at a school in downtown. And what's very fascinating about it is it's not a school for individuals with special needs. It's not a school for all students that have IEPs or really intense behavior challenges. The school is for all students that either are homeless or have significant housing instability. And we know that many of you are working with students that fall into this category of having homelessness. And what this school found was that many of the students at the school were demonstrating behaviors and they wanted a tool to teach their students, what does it mean to be responsible? What does it mean to be safe? What does it mean to be respectful? So they decided to roll this out in every single classroom from kindergarten through fifth grade. And once, and each teacher we met with individually based on the considerations guide to figure out, what do you want your form to look like? It's not me telling you what it looks like. You need that teacher buy-in of what they want it to look like. And so this is a form they each came up with, the second grade form and the fifth grade form. And in the interest of time, I'll just say this is a fifth grade form and the last form you saw was a fifth grade form, both ones that I worked on. And the reason they look so different is because it wasn't me guiding what the form looked like. It was the buy-in of the teacher and their input that made it look like.
Yeah.
And yes, we've used it in non-educational settings, Anna. We've used it in clinic settings, community settings, home settings. There's a lot of information on that on our website that you can check out, selfandmatch.com.
Yeah. So we wanted to give you just a little bit of background on the research on self-monitoring. And again, we go into more detail in our full training and in our manual, but the research on self-monitoring shows that it really increases student independence and self-determination. It also helps to place responsibility on the individual instead of an external source. So instead of the adults always saying, Jamie, you didn't do this, or Jamie, you need to do that, we first ask the student to reflect on how they're doing. It can be used with individuals with various levels of intellectual functioning. So there's research to show that it can be effective even with individuals that have intellectual disabilities, as long as it's modified and made accommodations to help them be successful. And it can increase behavioral success as well as classroom performance. It can be used for social skills, executive functioning skills, organizational skills. So all of those really effective behaviors that increase learning for our students. It also has high teacher acceptability, and as Jamie has already demonstrated, can be really individualized, and that's why we go through that considerations guide. And that match component is something else that's really important. That's a social accountability component. And the research really shows that if you combine a social accountability component with self-monitoring, the intervention is even more successful. So that's why we have that match component in our system.
And as I alluded to earlier, the neat thing also about self-image and the benefits you have in your school setting is that there's student benefits as well as staff benefits. And I won't go through this list. You can certainly read it when you get your PowerPoints later, but there are so many benefits for the student in terms of promoting honesty and that growth mindset and behavioral improvements. And then the staff benefits are, that they can use this data and it helps with behaviors they don't see, kind of like that question that came up earlier today.
Yeah.
So I've mentioned it a few times, and in terms of how this can align to IEP goals or how you can be using it to make database decisions, you can use Self-Image on paper, like a lot of the examples we showed you earlier. You can also use it digitally because we have developed a digital version of Self-Image that is available through Google Sheets. And when you use it, either way, you can write IEP goals to align with each of the questions on your form, whether it's respectful or following directions or safety. And then you can extract that data and you can report on the progress based on each goal separately. So I always say it's a little bit of working smarter, not harder, in terms of the way you're collecting data and the way you're using that data to make database decisions. And the neat thing about if you're doing it through the digital system is it's actually auto calculating that data for you and it's auto graphing it. And If we had more time, I would show it to you. But in the meantime, we have a little video that you could watch later on. I have a QR code. So if you decide you want to watch that, you can.
Yeah. So in your self and match system manual, a couple of things that you'll find, there's a lot of introductory materials that go over the research on self-monitoring and the benefits to self-monitoring. There's also those considerations guides that Jamie mentioned. Every self and match system, every form that you have seen is not just a piece of paper. It's really based on the results of this considerations guide, that roadmap that Jamie was talking about, that you sit down with your team and you talk to them about what do we need, and we break down every component of an effective intervention. So at the end, you develop this incredible form that will be helpful for the students in your environment. There's 19 sample forms. There's supplemental forms related to selecting behaviors and writing notes to parents and communication guides and sample stories that you can share with your students about how to implement it at staff trainings. There's a ton of resources in there, as well as you get access to an online forms portal, which has lots of different supplemental materials, as well as some forms that you can, template forms that you can utilize in Word or Google Sheets or Excel, whatever you feel comfortable in, as well as Self and Match Maker, which is a tool that you can use to create your own self and match forms.
Yep, and as we get toward the end today, I will be showing you QR codes for each of those. I've already alluded to this considerations guide. This is the form that comes in your manual that you would use as you're setting up that form as your roadmap for success to ensure that the intervention's individualized. And then in terms of QR codes that you can watch more later, this one is to show you the video of how to access our forms portal, what's available in the forms portal. You will have this emailed to you so you can click on it later. Don't worry about it now. The next QR code that you'll have is teaching you about the Self and Match Maker, which is a digital system that creates either a PDF or a Word doc of self and match forms for you. And I think there's one more. Yep, this one is where you can look at all of our trainings. We have really liked to cater these trainings to the audience that we're supporting. So yes, if we're working with a non-public school or parochial school, our training might look different than if we're working with a high school or a preschool. So if you follow this link, you'll see trainings about our introductory trainings, our intermediate trainings, our advanced trainings, as well as some global trainings we offer beyond just self-image. We have trainings about setting up your classroom for success or setting expectations. So once you visit this site, which I'll also link in an email to you later, you'll be able to read through all of those as well as the descriptions. And then the last QR code, which is probably the most important, is I know our goal was 20 minutes today. We pretty much stuck to it, but we know you might have individualized questions as you look to spend your funds or look toward your PD planning for next year. So if you want to talk more, just fill out this QR code link and we will set up a time to do a quick Zoom for you. Sometimes we set up our trainings completely through email. If that's what works best for you, we're fine with that. And if you prefer to set up a 10-minute Zoom or 15-minute Zoom to talk about how to individualize it for your school, we're happy to do that too. So that's it. We did mention it throughout the day that we're happy to stick around and answer questions that come up, but we wanted to make sure that the content was given super quick. So I know that was a super abbreviated version. Our introductory training is typically 2.5 hours on Zoom or 3 hours in person. So today just kind of scratched the surface of that tool that we want to put in your team's toolbox. You're always welcome to reach out to us through email, through any other method, social media. But for now, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions that you have at this time.